Kindly take your seats because we are going to start in 5 seconds. Thank you very much for your patience. We understand that leaving the room and then having to come back to the room might be a bit inconvenient, but COVID protocol goes first, and we're being very rigorous, not only out of respect for everyone who is following us on streaming, but also because of our safety. We need to allow our colleagues from Democratas to carry out their disinfection tasks because they are ensuring the safety of all of us who are present here today. So, I was saying, let's go back to the International Forum for Digital Transformation. We want this to be a space to reflect on the current challenges faced by companies and the business opportunities that open up for those who know how to rely on new technologies. You know, this is no longer an option. In the last year, technology transformation has accelerated in our country. Some reports say that in a year we've advanced the equivalent to 10 years. This is spectacular. We will first have a round table. So I would like to ask our guests to please come up stage as I name you and take your seat. Reinventing industry, manufacturing of the future. We have first Giuseppe Aliagas, Managing Partner, Digital Investments and Strategist at DIS Capital US. We also have Gemma Coria, Head of Operations and Business Development of Vega Pelayo. Clara Jimenez, Innovation Lead, Effect Center, Spain. Our moderator is David Suriol, founder and CEO of Moonshot. You are now experiencing one of the events in the future. This hybrid event is here to stay. Online, we have Mr. Federico Ruiz, Director of the 5G Observatory of Mobile World Capital in Barcelona. Can you hear us well? Yes, I can hear you perfectly. And not only that, but I can see you. Thank you. Thank you to all. Please, let's give them a round of applause. Good morning. Good morning to everyone who is with us here in person and remotely. Today's panel has guests representing completely different sectors. The idea is to come together to talk about digitalization or reindustrialization, as I call it. We have a representative from Accenture, who's Clara, Gemma, that comes from Vega Paz, which is an industry that has digitalized and applying technology to transform the industry for years now. Then we have Giuseppe. We need to take off our masks, right? Giuseppe will talk to us about investing in startups and the relationship they have with investors following the model in the United States. And finally, we have Federico as director of the Observatory of 5G Technology from Mobile World Capital. They have a lot to say in digital data and artificial intelligence and whatnot. Before starting, I would like each one of you to tell us your background. You know, this is very American. They tell us, tell us your story. What do you do? What are you doing here? So more than telling us your professional background, I would like us to share with you what got you here. Gemma, let's start with you because you have a great family history. Well, if I am here today, I think it's the result of many dreams. I am a dreamer with great family pride and with a single goal, which is to transform my company into the greatest possible company it can be, like all of those in my family who preceded me. I come from a family business that started in the 60s with a small bakery shop. This was back in the 60s with my grandparents, and in the 90s with my parents, I started to diversify and start getting into the production of desserts. They bought a couple of factories, really, and now we became an industry that produces a type of roll or muffin called a sobao, which is typical of northern Spain. So now our industry produces 40,000 pieces per day, and it works 24/7. We collaborate with large manufacturers of industrial dessert producers. They might be our competition, but really because of our position, they have become our allies, and we can collaborate. We are suppliers to great, large industries, but also to local supply chains. So I am very proud to be here, and I look forward to keep working so that Vega Pelayo can keep advancing and keep progressing. You were telling me earlier that before being digital, you were completely analog. I often joke about it because we're the third generation. My sister is much more digital than I am, because she tells me, ha ha ha, you were so non-digital, but now I'm a deputy director general. The director general is still my father. So my role is to define the strategy and see where I'm going to lead our company. So I need to be surrounded by the team that has much in-depth and greater digital knowledge. It is true that as a family, we have a clear belief of what digitalization has meant for us. You know, before we were a small bakery, and now we are leaders in what we do. Thank you, Federico. I read your profile. I had never met you before in person. And in addition to leading the 5G Observatory, you've also been an entrepreneur. This is correct. I came to the observatory after having a background in startups. I am a communications engineer. I started in the 80s, and I co-founded a company of semiconductors, of chips for communications, for televisions, for secure financial applications. That was a fascinating adventure. It was very enriching to me, and it reminds me the analog support of this digital world, because really it is the analog infrastructure that enables our digital universe. And now we're going back to that world because semiconductors are very important for 5G, and we're seeing it every day. Semiconductors are the basis for which all the large economic blocks are confronting each other. Then I worked in a company that produced automatic pilots for drones. That is a sector that shows how important connectivity is. 5G requires connectivity, control, video, sensors, and artificial intelligence. They will have an increasingly important role in our lives. Then, right before I joined the observatory, I worked in another startup, an SMEs, of financial technology. They worked in trading, high-frequency trading, and we saw the importance of latency and quickness in the network and how that changes everything. We also saw artificial intelligence breaking into trading. This is a self-regulated network, faster than we could ever manage. And in addition, there is another factor that changed everything, which was cryptocurrency. So in a certain way, everything comes together in 5G. Thank you, Federico. You will tell us shortly how all of this and 5G influences Industry 4.0. So Clara, you're a telecommunications engineer by the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. I imagine, Federico, you too? but you're from the Polytechnic University in Barcelona? No. I'm also a graduate from UPM in Madrid. Well, my idea was to come to Madrid. I come from Granada, from the province of Andalusia, and the only degree I could use to convince my father to let me come to Madrid was telecommunications. So I said, well, then telecommunications it is. This is how I started studying engineering, and when I got there, I realized that they were all smarter than I. And I thought, I'm in the right place, because if everyone that surrounds me is smarter than me, this is where I have to be. So this is what I've tried to do. I've tried to move myself to places where everyone around me is smarter than I, so that I can evolve. I've been in Accenture for about 25 years. I have worked in almost all the types of consultancy that a company can have. We are present in so many countries, in so many sectors. So I've worked with strategic to human resources consultancy, IT strategy. But 10 years ago, I started to focus on innovation when the company didn't have an innovation strategy in any of its countries. I am now seeing that a lot of young people don't like to join a big corporation because they think that their life is going to get stagnant. But I can tell you that in a company like Accenture, I've been able to build my own paths. I remember that a president told me once, Clara, you chose the easy path ahead of you. And I told, well, yeah, but picking the easy way, there a lot of people do that, but to pick the hard way, well, not so many do that. So I was able to think of many things that the company was not thinking about and create it. So now I am head of Accenture. I'm the lead of innovation in Accenture Iberia, which is Spain and Portugal. This means to be learning constantly, because I come to forums like this one. I have to be in touch with entrepreneurs, with research centers, and I have to say that this gives me an enormous opportunity to learn. We will talk about the ecosystem later on. Giuseppe, you're a global citizen. You speak 7 languages, but you live in San Francisco, though you're here now because of the pandemic. I think I'm a mix from family business. There's 4 of us. We're 4 brothers, but no one liked what my dad did. He had a car, he had a garage, a car garage. I like to learn like Clara. So my background is the following. I'm an economist. I studied in Barcelona. I worked in KPGM. In '94, my brother created an internet company. When he did that, I didn't know what internet was. Net in Catalan means clean, so I was wondering if he founded a cleaning company. But no, it was a technological company. There, we created one of the first ISPs in the world. Internet service providers. We made the company grow, then we fused with a Dutch company. Then we went out to the stock market with $12.3 million. Later on, we launched one of the first companies in the world, my brothers and I, to send SMS to televisions, to polytones, and that type of mobile technology. We had sales in 120 countries, offices in 18 countries. I spent many years living in Asia, developing the Asian market. We had a software factory in Bangladesh with 150 engineers. Then we had companies in Europe, Asia, the Americas. Then we sold the company. And I stayed in China. I worked for the Chinese government in innovation projects for Chinese television. We started to work with companies like Huawei, ZT to expand. We started to work with governments in Chinese markets, which are Africa and Latin America. So then not only did I start to sell e-governments, but in these continents we saw that there were other types of needs. They needed infrastructure. So we went from e-governments to selling them or to loan them Chinese money to develop infrastructures. They needed hydroelectric stations, hospitals, highways, infrastructures, the works. And we were doing government-to-government business. Then I lived in Guinea in Africa, in one of the poorest countries in the world. That was a very impressive experience. Then I lived for a few years in Argentina, financing a hydroelectric project in the Patagonia. And then I sold the company, and I had a lockup of 3 years to not compete in the sector. But when that lockup finished, I invested in technological companies. We decided to take one of them to Silicon Valley. I started there from zero, from the start, as an intern with this new company. And we started to sell to companies like Google, Apple, LinkedIn, and all these big tech corporations. They were buying our technology. We managed to make our company grow. Then we took it to Austin, Texas, which is another tech hub in the United States. Then I decided to move back to San Francisco and to work with Investment Bank. This is a technological investment bank. I did fundraising and mergers and acquisitions for tech companies. I've been lucky enough to work in projects like Hyperloop, which has this high-speed train, then Fisker, electric cars, projects of hardware as a service, Linksys, which is a big router company. I mean, I've worked in fascinating projects, and I've met great tech companies, which in a few years will be in charge of changing the world. Like Clara says, I like to be surrounded by people that bring something to my life. So every day in Silicon Valley is a new experience. And everything that we're going to talk about today, Industry 4.0 in Silicon Valley, is about talking to people who are working on projects that are designed to download your brain into a computer and then go to factories to create stem cells and fascinating things. So when I see what we're doing with Industry 4.0, I think we are in the prehistory of what this is going to become in a few years. One of my dreams is to get there and to see it. I don't know how, but I think that if I get closer to knowledge and I stay close to where this technology of the future is being developed, maybe I'd be lucky enough to have my brain downloaded in a few years, and I can be inside a machine in 25 years from now, seeing everything that's happening. Could you give me a brief definition of what Industry 4.0 is? Yes, for me, Industry 4.0 is a prehistory of the future. We're doing this to create cities, or to build cities in Mars, or to create the ecosystem where the human race will live 1,000 years from now. We are using machines to do the work that humans won't be able to do when the robots in Mars finally make it possible for us to go there and build factories and cities. When I talk about the Industry 4.0, this is what I see, that we're thinking about how to build the future factory of Sobaos in Mars. Since we mentioned the factory of buns and muffins and Sobaos, Gemma, I would like you to tell us how digitalization and robotization and data modernized a factory like yours, an industrial bakery. Yes, we understood that technology was not the end, but a means to achieve one of our strategic goals. We wanted to grow. We wanted to scale up our business to become internationally present. This was back in the early 2000s. At that time, my parents, even earlier, decided to automate the factory. In fact, now the factory is completely automated. It has robots that move products around. Maybe a product that has little added value, it's very traditional, like this type of muffin. Someone was laughing at me earlier because I brought a sobao and I want to show you. This is what it is. But you need a glass of milk for that, don't you? Yes, I'll share some with you during lunch. But I was telling you that for us, it was a means to an end to penetrate a national and international market and gain in size. So that was the phase that happened between 2000 and 2002. We automated and robotized our plant. Then we keep growing, we keep installing lines. All of them are robotic lines. And then a few years later, we said, okay, we are completely competitive. We are gaining a good market share. The market is accepting us because we give guarantees to our clients. And then we became collaborators of our own competitors. But there was more. In a market like mine, unlike the ones I don't know, that you do know, this market is so competitive that we have to control everything that is within our reach. This is why we decided to go digital. Our machines, our ovens, our dosifiers, the encapsulators that make the paper where you drop the dollop of dough had to be digitalized. So we channeled the data that we obtained from all of this to go to the control panels, to mid-management and to high management, and allow us to make decisions and optimize resources. Because sometimes we say robotics are within reach for everyone, really. So really, the way we manage our resources is what is going to allow us to stay in the market and to grow. Also, when we talk about robotics, digitalization, Industry 4.0, we always think about employment destruction. Companies like mine, which is a middle-sized company, have to do a lot of training or of sharing the experience, because we often hear about Industry 4.0 as the tool that destroys employment. But it's not the case, because if I grow, if I scale up my company, I will need people to operate my machines. Because we believe in a model that is a mix between humans and technology. There has to be a human behind each machine, adding value to the process. Robots might do jobs that humans don't want to do or that are repetitive and don't add any value. Excuse me to interrupt you, but I understand that a traditional employee in Vega Paz might be afraid of digitalization to a certain extent. One, because he might lose his job to a robot, and secondly, because of the qualification he might have. Do you maybe need people who are better trained? Well, first and foremost, we need our people to want to come with us, and then we work with them. That's why we train them. We invest lots of hours in training, and we have a business culture that is highly focused on technology, because they need to understand it as a solution and not as a problem. Technology really is the best partner to make the company grow, and this is the company that employs them. And we, as leaders, need to train our people. In Vega Pelayo, we are a mid-sized company, but maybe there are data, and maybe we were not that impressive, but we've invested in 5,000 hours of training since 2015. So we heavily invest in our people. But why? Well, because in the long term, I see that automatization will allow me to free talent that is doing tasks that is not adding value. And I can free it up for something else, making them understand and showing them that this is not a fad. No, this is not a trend. It is the way to become a great company. Obviously, most people agree with this vision, but there are a few that won't. But I think that once you achieve to demonstrate that this is the way to work in a larger company and the pride that you have from it, it really causes adherence and people want to work with us. If you all want to interrupt and add anything, please do feel free. But now I would like to ask Federico. 5G. When I hear about 5G, I think of my mobile phone. But what can 5G do for a factory of sobaos?
Well, the 4.0 technology and manufacturing is one of the 4 major scenarios that are at the origins of 5G. We have leisure and entertainment, and the other is just this. If we think of Europe, it's like a magnet. It may be bakery projects or other industrial products. And we have lots of different scenarios: energy, transport of water, gas, and other things. These are the major poles that 5G is envisaged for. Now, the Internet of Things thus far has been a mere anecdote in mobility. 2G, 3G, 4G mobility has been pretty much connecting people. And this technology is used to connect things amongst and between themselves and with humans. So in the 4.0 industry, we're taking things, flexibility that is to an extreme. And we have a historical example when Henry Ford developed the Model T and then further developed it. All of the machines and tools had to be changed. And this was a prequel of the major financial meltdown. There were people who work at new car factories. They were told overnight that they were going to get a whole new process underway nearly overnight. So we're not just talking about more bandwidth. Distance and time are important factors, but also reliability that perhaps is greater than what we can see in our cloud-based devices. And people are connected and assisted. Health is a good example. Assisted surgery. One of the surgeons in a certain operation, we normally think of factories, factory workers, but there are also other things like this surgery. And we're also seeing that we have full traceability of things. We are able to locate things and place them much better within centimeters with 5G technology. This technology is enabling for artificial intelligence. With Mars, we're going to need all sorts of ways in which we can respond to the unforeseeable. We need to do preliminary simulations So in the cloud, we'll be able to, with the cloud, have different versions. This isn't something, this is something we should be mindful of. We can't have this separated from telephony amongst people. We need connectivity for people. When we buy our cell phones, we're enabling these huge economies of scales. And these connectivities wouldn't be able to exist in the way they do without that. All of this only makes sense when we have this other connectivity. Well, taking a look at what you're saying and what Gemma also said, all industries are clearly interconnected. The technologies we're talking about isn't just artificial technology. We have health, robotics, energy, clean energy, and clean tech that are cross-cutting across all industries. So we have industry and technology, and then we have all of the ecosystem of all of the actors, the players. So I believe you're thinking of your own ecosystem, offering this to your clients. Well, we are leveraging the ecosystem that we already have. It's interesting that in Spain we have a center in Bilbao that's an innovation center which is tied into Industry 4.0, but it's called Industry X, which is like a question mark. We don't know. It's all tied into manufacturing, and Gemma was talking about this. We need to understand what's happening at the factory in real time. And I believe Federico, I'm sorry, I didn't remember your first name, Federico. We're simulating and trying to predict what is happening or what will happen. We need a digital twin. We're working on that concept. And it's true that you have a very broad value chain where you have to integrate a whole lot of different components and a lot of different types of technology, because we have artificial intelligence, big data, 5G connectivity issues, the levels that we actually need, because knowing what is happening in a factory, well, but not in real time, and be able to predict it. And in industry, this is what most data what generates most data. All of this technologically, well, a company like ours certainly can't do this alone. We have a lot of technologists, but you need an ecosystem in order to come up with the solutions, and you need to string them together to build the right architecture to implement this. We were talking about digitalization as it relates to people. I think this is very interesting. And, well, I've been working on this and familiar with it for the last 30 years. And it was something complicated 30 years ago, even for people who studied this. But it's been democratized. It's become easy. And what's even very complex and difficult has been made easy for users. And this means that most people, it's not quantum physics, quantum computing is, but this isn't quantum physics. It's not complex. So there are upskilling and reskilling programs, and the idea is for everybody to understand this to a certain extent. When technology is something that scientists and academicians have been put forward, when we talk about artificial intelligence, it's explained in a very complicated way, but it's very important for the general public to understand this. It's important for them to adapt to this new context, and we also have to understand something that's very positive, which isn't only something that concerns professionals in our company, but the whole value chain. We have to think of something much broader and not just limited to what I own. I'm thinking of Accenture. In order for this to work, I'm thinking of you, we need digitalized providers, service providers, and product providers, and this is much more complex. All of this, I'm sure you heard a lot about it. It's tied into next generation funds. Well, people think, why should I digitalize if the people around me aren't going to do it? If people don't perceive that everybody needs to do this, then it won't happen. This is the only way it can make actual sense. And this is truly complicated for everybody without any exception to do this. Well, so you need to include everyone, yes, and I am trying to connect what everyone is saying, but it's complicated to work in this ecosystem because I've always considered that the entrepreneurial ecosystem, which isn't just startup, but also SMEs with a technological mass, well, if you work in an SME, you're not a good candidate for talent. But if you work in a startup, it is very good. But a startup is actually an SME, and their future is to be a company. And I think it's important to be mindful of this because there are a lot of little bubbles. And SMEs are undervalued. In the ecosystem, I believe the entrepreneurial ecosystem is SMEs, startups, scientific and technology is very intense there. We have things in an early stage, but it's important to understand this as widespread capacity. I take a look at the companies that work in our ecosystem as an extension of ourselves, and when we work together on projects, there are people don't know who's in Accenture and who is from that other company. And that's the true challenge. We have to work on two virtues in order to work together. And these virtues aren't taught in school or at work. One is generosity, because you need to give in this ecosystem. And another virtue is being humble. Our world is so complex that in order to move on to a higher level of products, you need to collaborate, cooperate. And I think it's very important to bring this out. I have a startup and I want to be an SME. Well, you're on the right path. I've had anecdotes. I've taken a look at a lot of different startups over the years, and when I saw that the objective was to be bought by Accenture, I didn't like it anymore. Or, well, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to do this to generate wealth, not to become wealthy. And if we don't understand that, well, we're not going to progress here in Spain. When people come and say, oh, they were able to draw all of this funding, and of course I'm fully respectful of those of you who are invested, because, well, of course, there's a mismatch between ideas and funding. But what's important is I always ask, how many clients or customers do you have? Give me the list, because that's the objective, not to have investors, but to have customers or clients. I'm certain that your father wouldn't want to sell because it's like selling an arm or a leg. This is something that's not very clear in this ecosystem, and I'm going to avail myself of this opportunity at Madrid platform to say this. Investors are necessary. That's the key. The key of the free market is to believe in the future. That's the most beautiful thing human beings can do, is to believe in the future. That's why people are giving you money, and they ask you how many customers you have. Well, I suppose so, but not all that often. Give me their names. How much did you invoice? Giuseppe, just following along with this thread and the connection between startup and company, because you travel a lot, where do you see the biggest technology providers and consumers? Well, overall, I would say that China is one of the major technological poles. In 2015, their government launched Made in China. They wanted 10 sectors that were strategic for the future of humanity to be led by China. Semiconductors, artificial intelligence, self-driven or driving vehicles. So China built a plan based on its 5-year plan so that in 2025 they would be one of the top world players. And China is investing a lot in semiconductors. They're buying technology around the world so that they will own it. And basically, their competitors back in the day, well, Germany in 2011, it's 10 years, although it seems like it's new, but it's already 10 years old. In the United States, these are the countries who are developing Industry 4.0 the most. They are setting their sights on a major change, and you need an entrepreneuring mindset. Unlike what many of us think, China is communist, but they want to lead the world for the good. It's not that they want communism around the world. They believe that their system of government is as good as any other. So I'm meaning to say with this is that if we want to be leaders in 4.0 industry, we need our governments behind us. We need 5, 10, 15-year plans led by the government. In the West, we can't plan our economy in the long term because our politicians last 4 years. They're already thinking of elections, and now everybody is fighting instead of building multi-year plans. So China, United States, and then Germany, because of their mindset, and France is a major industrial country. That's where I see the future. I hope I'm mistaken. And then what about academia? Well, yes, we have our universities, and then we have startups. Basically, what do startups do? We give them money because we think that they'll change the future. The technology will disrupt part of another company or industry. Oftentimes, we're not worried about clients. We are creating products that we think are going to give us a better future, or perhaps there'll be a sector. Maybe we'll be making meat from stem cells or vegetables. You might not need clients or customers for that, but you would need a project that's aimed to transform the future. The meat industry, of course, doesn't want to invest in something that's going to destroy it. So we as investors have to change the paradigm and make a different future for ourselves, because that's where the money is. The money is in the hands of companies. Nobody in the international financial system is going to be investing in cryptocurrencies because they don't want to lose their business. That's what startups are for. I think that all of us need some objective in life, and one of them is to earn money. If you're doing something that you like, that you innovate and you change the world, and you can make money at the same time, well, wonderful. Even the Chinese want to do that. And then you have the accelerators and startups and universities, and then we have SMEs and labs in big corporations. All of this is innovation, and without innovation, we die. So Industry 4.0 involves artificial intelligence, all of the major startups and the consultancies. All of this is changing companies' mindsets, and this is what makes countries progress and companies progress also. There's not a single pole, but as soon as you have the support of the major state structures, then you'll do much better. In Spain, there are people who are courageous and take the step, but we do have talent in Spain, yes, but there's no investment. You establish a company, but to get $1 million, you need to do a lot. And with a PowerPoint, you get that in the United States. In Spain, people are very greedy and people want to do things now and control you. And in the United States, people are left room to develop their ideas. And, well, we know some will come out good and others won't. This is the change that we need in investors. This is the change investors need to make in Spain. We need to invest more in startups. Who knows whether this company who's starting up now on the Google campus will be a groundbreaker in 10 years. And do you get frustrated when you see the different pace of things, when you see people believe that they won't have any startup? Well, from Accenture, you can give us thousands of examples of failed integration. Well, a startup has a very quick metabolism, and a major corporation has a metabolism in line with its size. And then the longevities are different. This is actual hard fact. So we have to see how to align this. It's complicated. I was telling you some anecdotes before we started this roundtable. You have to credit as a provider. In order to work with an investor, you have to have everything in order in terms of your taxes and payment of social benefit. And this was very surprising in the corporate world. I was a bit more in touch with it, but other people were very surprised. So we, as we were saying, want things to run smoothly. We want things to become systematic. Otherwise, it's hard. So what do you need to change? First, legal processes, the legal frameworks, the wording of the legal agreements are not very appropriate at all to sign contracts with startups, because the corporation drafts things too arrogantly. I'll say this, quote unquote, but not just in the company I'm in. We have others. We ask legal departments for a legal framework that attenuates these conditions to generate more trust in signing these agreements. And secondly is the sheerly financial aspect of of all this. Many companies pay in a 90-day period. Well, you need to pay in a 60 or 30-day period if you're paying a startup. Or we have rush payments so that we don't strangle startups. So we changed this process, purchasing process, very quickly, in a couple of days, could fill out a form and get authorization very quickly. So there are things that you need to change. We have had to generate a sponsorship program where we chose somebody from the executive team to sponsor that startup and accompany them, walk hand in hand with them. And we need to envisage initiatives to help this become systematic. And then, of course, there were a lot of talks that we gave to invite people to participate so that this approach could be more prevalent. We were able to get this done with certain companies, but not with others. As a conclusion, I'm going to ask you a question, Federico, but you each have 30 seconds. Something to be set in stone, something you want to say to be set in stone. From Accenture, your experience in the United States. And what about World Mobile Congress? Will there be one? There will be. There will be. I have my ticket, my hotel, after a very tough year. When? It will be at the very end of June, beginning of July. It will be a bit different this year. We won't be able to mill around the stands as much. We won't be able to touch as much. We'll have to make more appointments. But I hope that this is a sign of getting back to normal. Will it be held in Barcelona? In Barcelona as ever. Would you like to give us one last brushstroke? And then I can give the floor to other people. I identify with everything you said. I've seen Industry 4.0 more, and 5G helps me see this way as a change of era. Our world was presided over by the shift from 2G to 3G, and 5G is going to generate a different economy in Europe, in China, in Japan, and in the United States. And we need to see who's going to be leading this new era. We'll move from software that became king, and now we're moving on to another paradigm. Thank you very much. Who wants to be the next one to say something? From the standpoint of an SME, whatever the size, whatever they manufacture, I think that there's no technology yes, technology no dilemma. It's definitely technology. Otherwise, you're going to disappear. Sure. Josep. I would say that we have to innovate, and you have to look where the next company that will destroy us is and become their allies before they ally with someone else. So you have to go out and do some scouting and be on the lookout for startups that are truly innovating. It's also very important that industries have their own department of innovation, but they also need to have a department that is constantly
surveying the market, and that allows your business to invest in the startup that will be the leader in the next 15 years. Who is going to be where? Where is the industry going to come from? Any place in the world. There are thousands of technological hubs in the world. There's not a single pole. What makes Silicon Valley great is that there's a lot of capital and talent in that place, but we're seeing these hubs of capital and talent springing up in every world. So I think that Silicon Valley is going to be irrelevant in a few years. Hopefully, it would be Spain, no, the next place. Well, yes, but for that we need investment. We need hubs of agricultural technology in rural areas, or specialized hubs in metallurgy in the areas where that has been traditionally been produced. This is where politicians need to be placing their focus as well. Clara? I think technology, yes. Talent, yes. The two T's, talent and technology. I would like to finish with an anthropologist's phrase that said, the great discovery of the human being is to know that he or she will die, because that changes everything, that makes us look into the future. And I would say that for the company is the same thing. If you know that your business is going to die, you're continually working on what to do. And you cannot think of this when you're already dying. You have to think about the future in the best, when you're living your best. I think we should have that spirit, because if we keep this idea in mind, I think we will constantly be trying to innovate or to take on new challenges, to be ambitious. I think ambition is good. I think it's important to stay ambitious, not only for companies, regardless of their side. I think that the political spheres and public arenas also need to have this ambition to achieve things. In Europe, we have a great opportunity, and now we must take advantage of it. Thank you very much. To finish up, my lessons learned that the technologies are important, industries have to adopt it, but we need a certain amount or a big amount of humility to know that you need to surround yourself with people who are better than you. Otherwise, you will lag behind. Thank you very much, and until next time. Could you please leave the stage on the left side? Thank you. It was very, very interesting, fascinating. David, I'm very much in line with the last thing you said. Collaboration, public support is necessary, but also hubs, innovation, more innovators than ever. We need them more than ever. This is a reality. Now, let's keep going with the program. We're going to close this morning's session with another very interesting forum. Digitalization in education. Education is the basis for everything, so imagine how important is that. New challenges, new situations, trends of digital transformation applied to education. So e-tech, the role of multilateral organisms defining new educational tools, collaborative platforms that are rising because the education is also going through a revolution. This has been one of the most affected sectors, and they've had to move quickly to transform and adapt in 2020 and keep offering a service that, like I said, is fundamental. To speak about all of this, digitalization and technologies in education and work, which is the title of our next roundtable, I would like to invite now up to the stage Carla Alarcón, Director General of Foundation Everis, Andrés Delic, Deputy Secretary General of the Organization of Ibero-American States, Pablo Ruiz de la Torre, CEO and founder of Tribu, and Oscar Montes Pineda, Professor of Business Innovation at the University of Alcalá de Henares, will be the moderator.
Bueno, muy buenas, sí, efectivamente, bienvenidos.
Yes, hello and welcome. We can take off our masks off so that so that we can get comfortable. Well, thank you very much and congratulations to the organizers. Welcome to this second session of today's morning session. We have a big challenge ahead of us because of the topics that we are in charge of discussing, which is technology in education, and more specifically, the new forms of education in the context of the world of work. I want to welcome our guests. I hope you're doing well. I would like to give you the floor so that you can introduce yourselves, and perhaps, Carla, would you like to start? Carla is the Director General of Everis Foundation here in Madrid. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Oscar, and thank you for the invitation. Despite the current COVID circumstances, it is wonderful to have platforms like this one that allow us to connect worlds such as Europe and Latin America in a hybrid event. Like Oscar said, my name is Carla Alarcón, and I'm Director General of Everis Foundation. I have 15 years of experience in strategic consultancy, and I started leading Fundación Everis for 7 years. This is a multinational that belongs to the Nippon EPP Daira group to promote entrepreneur talent and innovation, entrepreneurs' talent and innovation in society. Thank you. Andrés, welcome as well. You are the Deputy Secretary General of the OIE. So please, the floor is yours. Please tell us what your role is. Deputy Secretary General. Yes, I am the Deputy Secretary General. Thank you very much for this invitation. It is really a great opportunity to share with you what the OIE is. We are the oldest Ibero-American cooperation organism. We've been working for more than 70 years, and we specialize in education. Before working at the OIE, I served in the public sector and private sector in my country. For 8 or 9 years now, I've been working to promote cooperation in education in the region. Wonderful. Well, thank you for this global perspective that you're going to bring to the discussion. Our third panelist is Pablo Ruiz de la Torre. Welcome. You come more from a different business model, from the concept of talent and from being an entrepreneur. They say that what you can copy almost everything except for a working team. So perhaps this would be a good introduction so that you can share your experience with us. Well, first of all, I would like to join my voice to what my colleagues have said. Thank you to Madrid Platform for inviting me. Like you were saying, it is truly a pleasure to come to a place and to see each other and to feel the warmth. When I was 19, I set up Tribu, the company that I still lead. What we do is very much in line with what you were saying. This is a very complicated moment. It has many challenges and opportunities. And then we just lived a tipping point last year. And we're still trying to weather the storm. We've realized that what the world needs more than ever is human transformation, and we can only achieve that if we put people at the core of what we do, of who we want to be as a country, or as a world. So we work alongside with companies, accompanying them in their process of cultural and organizational change. In a more micro level, we generate opportunities, contents, and experiences to contribute for talent to be as well prepared as possible, so that when change arrives, change can actually happen because it will find people ready for it. Perhaps it would be great to start a debate. The idea is to analyze the role of technology and how it is transforming education, but also also business models. The previous roundtable was focused on Industry 4.0. I think that technology is not only affecting the way things are done, but there is another element accompanying this new industry, which is the circular economy. The first question would be the following. How is digitalization changing the world of education and the labor market, and what is being demanded within this new model? Carla, would you like to start? And you can tell us your perspective as a general director of a world company. Thank you for this question. I think it is really important to think or to reflect whether education is changing the education system. It is not the same to have some classes online than to digitally transform education, because education is the base of any society. We have the opportunity to change structural problems with changes in education. We have digital transformation present everywhere in the banking system, finance system. But then what happens with education? We really think the focus should be on education. Digitalization means transforming a process. It means changing everything, including capacities. Not only what you're teaching and how you're teaching your students, but it's also how the teachers and the entire education team should change in the process. We look at robotization, artificial intelligence every day. We hear about blockchain, and how can this come into the classroom? Now, children can learn a language with children connected between Madrid and the UK. Virtual reality allows us for that, and I think we need to integrate technology in the education process, because even today, 53.5% does not have internet access, meaning that half of the world, which is millions of people, do not have internet access. 2 out of 3 children do not have access to connectivity, and that is 1.3 billion people, according to UNICEF, who don't have access to data. COVID has allowed us to move many things forward, but it also has deepened the digital gap. I think education has had a backlash, particularly for those who were not riding the digital wave. Let me rescue something you said, which is the role of technology. We're talking about Watson, referring to another company that you'll know very well. And we talk about autonomous cars, self-driving cars. So what is the challenge for education from the point of view of the OIE? Very much is in line with what Carla said. There is a joke in education that says, would anybody recognize a character from a historic character from the 1700s and brought him or her to the 21st century? This character would not recognize maybe the financial system or many of our modern things, but that person would recognize education. They would recognize the school. Why? Because the school doesn't have to do with technology, but with a form of organizing ourselves, and it has implications that go beyond technology. Does this mean we cannot change it? No, not at all. It is that it is resilient. And I am sure that many generations are grateful to what the school meant in terms of human evolution, but it is not easy to change. It's not as simple as connecting a few computers. Why do I say this? Because of the experience we've had in our region and in the world in general, in the last 25 years, computers have been massively integrated into schools, and this has not necessarily impacted in a positive way the quality of learning. This doesn't mean that we did the wrong thing. No. What I said is that it did not impact the core of the educational system, which is to educate our young generations. The pandemic brutally faced us with a situation. In the case of Latin America, 180 million children stopped going to school from one day to the next. And what was an accessory, which was technology, had to be placed at the center of the educational system. So the question now would be to see, how did we do? What happened? We're still in the midst of the process, and we can do some partial evaluations. We did great according to those who had access to those possibilities. Carla said it very well. There is a digital gap. Many families and many students didn't have access to a computer or didn't have a broadband connection, and they were forced to look for other older ways, so to speak, to keep following their education. For example, publications or TV. So there is a disconnection between technology, which is powerful, the training that our teachers have, and the way the educational systems are organized. So the first lesson from the pandemic is that technology is not enough. If we don't rethink how the education system works as a whole, this revolution promised by technology is not going to get into the classrooms, because technology means not only to be able to access internet, it implies new pedagogical, new learning models, and new ways to organize learning in schools. It is important to highlight that those who produce knowledge are not just the teachers and the students, it's an entire school who relate to the students and their families. So there is a long way to go in this sense. I think that the private sector has a big role to play. Most public systems have been developed precisely on criteria based on public systems, but the private sector for decades has been investing and driving forward strategies with platforms and with content. Synergies should be found between what's being produced by the private sector and the public sector. One day this pandemic will be over, and we will see the lessons learned and the souvenirs left from it. I think one of the lessons to learn will be the following. Everything that is being produced in the private sector, development, education, etc., can we integrate it into a structure that shows a lot of resistance or that is very conservative in the face of change? Yes, without a doubt, I think that's one of the great lessons in education. Education is not only an environment of teaching and learning. There are many agents. There are private companies there is the family, the home. They're all involved in this learning process. There was a report, the Coleman report, many years ago, which was already talking about what is the impact, or how does it influence, how does technology influence academic performance. I think in this sense we can create capacity. And the question is now, are we really going to achieve good performance with technology, what type of capacities have to be thought or designed for the educational system? We could talk about some basic competitions. There are reports such as PISA or PIAC that inform us, but if we had to think about what to build, what are the skills or the capacities that are in demand? I don't want to focus on the pandemic because luckily it'll not stay with us forever and we'll get out of this, but certainly I think the pandemic has been a tough wake-up call, not only for us as a country, but for the entire world. Beyond reflecting about technology, digitalization, and education, I think the most important thing is that it has helped us value what's truly important, what really makes a difference in the life of any human being. And therefore, what should be at the core of our objectives and concerns and ambitions. Taking this reflection to the business world or the public and political world means we should analyze to what extent are we prepared to a sudden change. Like this one, this is the first great world crisis that we've seen, and we've had many more ahead of us. I'm 26-year-old, and we are all very concerned about what's happening, but when we talk to our grandparents, we realize that this is not the first or the last crisis we'll live through. In terms of capacities, the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything. So it makes you question your life differently. Thinking about Spain and Latin America, with whom we share a lot of ties, I think one of the great challenges we have ahead is the inequality in opportunities. I think technology is only a means, it's not an end, and it is a mean that increases the democratization of connectivity. It allows people to access this infinite growth. It is true that there is a foundation, a base, which is the capacity to guarantee equal opportunities for everyone, so that we can then promote development, growth, and human and cultural development as well. Many companies are thinking about this, and they're all concerned about when are we going to go back to the office. And I don't think that should be the question. The question should be, what for? What for? And maybe instead of asking, when are we going to go back to school, we should ask, why should I go back to school? What is the role that education will play in society? My mother laughs when I tell her this, but the type of parents that we each have determines the values that we have or the capacities that we'll be able to develop during the rest of our life. I think education is one of the things that has not changed or has changed very, very little in the last 200 years. And it is really the foundation to promote any type of progress or growth or development at a social level. Equal opportunities for education, for health, and for work. I think education is the base, and that is a great challenge we have ahead of us. I constantly hear skills that are needed, public speaking, resilience, amongst others. And I think we could keep publishing reports for the next 50 years of what we need to study and we need to learn and how we need to be. But before thinking of the what, we need to think of what are we here for? What are we here for? Because once you answer that question, you think about that, then you start thinking of what to study, not to have more tools, but to learn what do you want to do for yourself. Often the education system teaches us not to get too good at anything, not to attract attention. And I think instead we need to teach people to be courageous, to be humble enough to not be afraid to recognize that they don't know something. People who are capable of listening and understanding the problems we have around us, which are very basic. Sometimes we're too focused on the technology and the economy and the new social contract, which is important, but I think the base is a cultural change. We need to recover basic things like moderation. Or like, what is the problem with not being radical? It looks like in our country, the more radical you are, the better. And perhaps what we need to understand is that all the great changes in the history of humanity have happened through collaboration, through dialogue, through not wanting to always be right, but instead wanting to find the solution, and from being humble, that you don't know something, and if you recognize it, it's okay. So if whether my e-book is not an e-book and my computer is better, I haven't that doesn't really matter. Life is not about adding up years, but about living years. If we don't understand that, we'll keep making the same mistakes for another generation. And the opportunity we have today is to think that after the pandemic, we will have new opportunities. We need to realize that this is life trying to get our attention, to not go back to the same old thing we did, but this is our opportunity to reflect. Why are we here? What can we do? What can be our contribution? And more than anything, what can I learn to be better myself? Unfortunately, this is not something taught in the educational system. What we're taught is to comply, to fit with the rest. Okay, many ideas here. Living, transcending. Now I will give you the freedom to interact if you want, but if we center in the Ibero-American framework, how has the educational system responded to this transformation that you were discussing? Many countries have not reopened schools for many, many weeks. So what was the role of technology? Was it good? Did it allow for progress? Excuse me if I jump in. Like we were saying before, there was inequality. All educational systems tried to quickly respond with virtual means, but they weren't all able to do it. What I find interesting is that not all of them were able to find distance learning options in March of last year. What was most impressive, however, is that between 22 or 23 cases that we studied, 19 of them, in addition, used television as a system. We could argue that television is technology from 50 or 60 years ago. And why do I mention it? Because to this day, access is not as democratic as it should be. So it's not as democratic as it should be because not everyone has the same access. Not everyone can access all of these new technologies. But in addition, school, in-person school, precisely democratizes learning. And in the network, it doesn't just happen. The virtual world doesn't do that. It doesn't democratize learning. And that is not always present in the network, and your family cannot always do it for you. For different reasons, maybe because of the knowledge that your family members have, or for any other reason. So what this situation showed us is the limits of what we've been doing for the last 20 years and how educational systems have interacted with the virtual and the digital worlds. There is a part that has to do with access and to democratizing technology so that everyone can participate. And another one is reflecting on the impact of how the education system is organized. So, how much does technology and digitalization has to do with a school's administration? Well, not much. Not much, I would say. Maybe they use Excel, but this is very far from using artificial intelligence in terms of what's happening with students and to really outline education more precisely. This has nothing to do with learning strategies, using new tools. I'm not saying this is not happening. We see experiences that are more or less important of schools or of ecosystems of 10 or 20 schools or maybe of an entire city. But in general terms, when you look at the whole, I would say that educational systems in Iberoamerica are still working the same way as 200 years ago. You have buildings with vertical structures, with vertical curricula or teachers that have learned something and develop what they learned when they were trained. They use certain strategies. Sometimes they make enormous efforts to catch up with technology, but they are very far from that having a true impact.
We have both of these new challenges. We have the challenge to making access to these resources much more universal, and we need to really seriously think in education about how these tools can boost learning of kids at school. Also, you were pointing towards this. School is more than just learning certain skills for the labor job market. If that were what it was, it could be replaced by other models. It's actually what societies, the model societies, have chosen in order to foster harmonious coexistence. Schools are that too, and sometimes we lose sight of this. My feeling is that we're losing a lot more of that by not being there in person. We've substituted certain things with digital technologies. Oscar, I wanted to say something, and you were also saying this. Education via digitalization will enable democratization to happen, but also it will enhance the quality of what is taught, because everyone at a click or by watching a video will be able to access this quality in education, which is a deficit that we've seen because there are the haves and the have-nots, and quality isn't uniform. And also, Pablo, it's very interesting what you're talking about as well. People shouldn't be thinking about what work are we going to have? No, we need to think about what problems we're going to be solving for life in general, beyond work. Digitalization and the digital divide doesn't just affect kids at school, it's the job market, it's entrepreneuring. We have huge unemployment worldwide. In the EU, there were 300,000 vacancies, jobs that were not filled because there weren't people qualified to do that. So we have to educate using a different concept. We have to face today's challenges, not tomorrow's. Well, I will perhaps tie into what you're saying. You're talking about the digital gap. A lot of major initiatives identify three things. Infrastructure, in other words, devices, computers being connected, the skills that people need to use this technology generally. And then in education, we think of this pedagogy, specific content. Now, I don't know, we have a foundation, we work with social responsibility, we work through the foundation, but I've seen that you have lots of different initiatives who are starting from scratch to gain digital skills. Yes, of course. I think that this is a public and a private role, and we have this new wave of change. And for the last 20 years, we have set our sights on entrepreneurship that's technological. We wanted people to get the idea that they could solve things via technology. And I think that the pandemic has empowered people. In addition to this, we've also worked on a pilot program with the Madrid City Council. This is something that we announced not too long ago, and we are retraining people in 6 months in different programming languages, and we are going to be a cybersecurity Python in the city of Madrid. This will enable people to work with their careers. And we also need to work from an early age. We started a long time ago to get children to see how important digitalization and robotics are. We had programming workshops so that children would be more than just mere consumers of technology. We all have cell phones and we know how an iPad works. But children might find problems in their surroundings, and we want them to have the reflex to be able to solve them. Yes, I think it's sort of funny when you think of digital around the world. We have people who have access to a cell phone, to internet, and even the social media. It's complicated to use a computer, but if we have to browse in a language like English that's not our own, it's even more complicated. So looking at the role of education over a person's career, we're managing knowledge, and some of the interesting elements here have to do with tacit knowledge and knowledge sharing and learning. And then there are things that make me think that we're setting our sights on technology, on automating, on digitalizing. What role does education have in lifelong learning, or life-wide learning, we might call it? We have people in that environment, but is it the people or the technology that should be on top? Well, I think technology in and of itself is worth nothing if it doesn't have people both in front of it and behind it. Now, I think it's true, you were talking about this before. We saw this in the last year and a half. We had a historical landmark. In just about a year and a half, we were able to generate a global answer. People had a problem in common, and we have started our vaccination process just recently. It looks like we're going to have solved it. And the major conclusion here is that when there's conviction and when there's collaboration and there's a plan of action, nothing can stop this world. When we talk more about education, when we talk about hundreds of years that we've had certain problems, well, either there's not collaboration, there's not conviction, or there's not a plan of action. But when the three converge, when we have COVID-19, well, it seems easy, but it does enable us to solve the problem. So if we have problems that have been lingering for 50 or even only 10 years, that's the reason. And then I fully agree that technology is a mere facilitator, but it depends on each and every one of us, and we're in a context in history, and I'm talking about the society that we live in now, we're probably, not just my generation, but everybody on the planet alive today, we are the generation, all of us on the planet now, that have a big opinion, but not necessarily the capacity to analyze and decide. This makes things complicated because when we realize that the main problem isn't out there in the world doesn't have problems. It's we as individuals who have problems, and we either generate problems or suffer from problems. We talk about education, the pandemic, energy transition, and nearly always this is the cause or the consequence of what human beings are doing. So these are problems that we have as a society, and we have this structural change that we need to be able to trigger. I think, unfortunately, there are still people who want to take the same bus as they did before this pandemic started. And we need to understand why we're here. And when we talk about that connection between the job market and education, well, people work and they say, okay, well, I'm studying this because it will get me a job. Well, what kind of a job? Well, you'll be lucky if there won't be a pandemic, or maybe all of a sudden the language will change. Anything can happen in just 4 years while you're studying. So something that looks promising today, but if you base yourself only on that, then maybe you're a recipe for failure. We need to be able to evolve. We need to understand what the world needs. So living in a country like us, we have the largest youth unemployment rate in all of Europe. So people aren't stupid because we have huge amounts of talents here, like in Latin America. The problem is that people are told a narrative of what life is supposed to be that just doesn't fit anymore. And the companies, they need to adapt when they want to bring people to continue to transform. They find that the people who can be drawn are told a story that's no longer showing in the theater near you. So there are people who are 50 years old, well, they still have horizons ahead of them. So we're constantly evolving for people who are 22, people who are 65. Everybody at every age is facing the same problem of constant evolution. And a lot of times we don't want to change, but when we change, the world changes with us. Well, yes, this debate is interesting. Placing the focus on the issue of technology, and there's a certain amount of debate. Technology may be able to eventually replace human beings, So what about this substitution? Can it be an increase, a complement? This is the big debate. From this standpoint, well, I don't know who's going to replace us, and what sort of skills will we need, or what type of technology we will need. Yes. Well, one of the things that we have to do is not think of a single model when we think of technology. This type of technology, which is changing the world, is more manageable if you think of lifelong learning with people who are young or maybe not that young, and they've begun to learn and continue learning and be self-taught. We might envisage this with secondary or higher learning. This comes hand in hand with the internationalization of universities, and to a certain extent, one might think that one could replace in-person teaching with other teaching on a secondary or at a higher learning level, but certainly not in elementary school. There are people who can chat with a company as an adult as they learn to chat with their friends when they were young. That's fine, but what I can't imagine is a model of this sort, particularly in elementary school, children who are between 5 and 11 years old. There are several reasons. One of the raison d'être of school has to do with socialization. That's one reason. And particularly at that age, in educational or pedagogical relations, there's something that's very important that technology can't change. The relationship between teachers and students sometimes is not favorable, but is important, and technologies cannot replace that. Certainly not at all. When ministries of education do surveys with children to see, after several months out of school, what they think, and what they say is, I want to see my schoolmates, my friends. I want to see the teacher. In America, in Latin America, that's the response we get. Now, having said this, it's clear that this world that we live in requires different skills than what we were talking about 100 years ago or 50 years ago. The good news is that many of the skills that life requires, social life and so forth, are the same ones that we needed on the job market when we said we need flexibility, ability to learn, working, doing teamwork, that is, leadership skills. Well, this is the same as we've always seen in social life and democratic life. 120 years ago, we had strictly vertical productive societies. There was a tension, but these values and these skills can be perceived as necessary in both normal everyday life and in the business or work sphere, which is good news. So we need to learn how to work with this new technology. And school sometimes prepares us for this as if these were accessory skills. And then there's a third very big challenge for education is to help kids to live in a world where the communication explosion, social media, and so forth is what it is. There are a lot of things circulating out there, and we need to live with this. And the educational system, in that sense, is still having its doubts. We need to know how to separate truth from falsehoods, which is a big issue on the social media. We need to be able to do this. We have this profile when we go to school, and even parents at school. 50 years ago, a boy or a girl in Bogota, Madrid, Mexico City, or Lima, or anywhere else around the world, the parents were certain examples, teachers were other examples, or set other examples. And we have access, infinite access to opportunities, to knowledge, information. And so the function and the role and the value that teachers at an elementary school or even a nursery school have, and even the role that fathers and mothers play at home. So the major function was to convey knowledge from one generation to the next. I know how to add and subtract. I need to convey this to the next generation. Now, when a father is asked a question or a mother about what he or she found on the social media, well, parents have different roles as do teachers in school. If we don't take this education to people who are actually doing this, well, then we have a basic problem, because we are wanting to do the same thing and it doesn't work. So it's not teachers who only teach, teachers also learn. And I think that's magical and necessary and is of great value. So what role should a father or mother play? We have to think about this. We have a lot that we're learning. There were people who were seen as having all of the knowledge. It's no longer the teacher, it's now Google. So, do we still need these figures? We have to teach people how to think and how to call things into question. And we might not have the same tools and the same skills as we had before. The world is changing. So there are kids who shut off the phone in the classroom, and so then it's supposed to be the teacher who knows everything. What's most important is to be very humble. It's not a question of knowing everything. The problem is not being willing to ask a question. What role does the teacher play at school? That's the big question. Well, Jose Antonio Marina said that the tribe educates. It's the elder who taught the rest of the tribe of the basic knowledge that they had. And we were talking about robots. People are afraid of robotization. They don't want to be left without a job. But I think that we As human beings need to be creative in our thinking, and we need to be critical in our thinking. I think that this COVID pandemic has really put people at the center of everything, and we are changing the world for the better, let's hope, not for the worse. We all have a tremendous responsibility. We can't lumber teachers with all of the
Yo creo que han habido muchas ideas realmente por ir para recoger y para debatir
there were a lot of different ideas
yo me quedaría,
that could be debated
ahora,
much further in depth.
pequeño chascarrillo, ¿no? Como dicen, me acuerdo de Barrio Sésamo, no sé si
I remember Sesame Street.
Son los programas por televisión, ¿no?
These television programs that were the first educational programs, and in China, in the COVID era, we saw this. If we think of this evolution and how education is evolving, generally speaking, do you really think that technology is transforming education, the educational system?
El mercado de trabajo, ahora se está hablando de que existe una demanda cada vez más alta, eventualmente, de esas vacantes no cubiertas, eventualmente porque no se encuentra personal con las habilidades y competencias. ¿Estamos formando mal o se están demandando
seeing a mismatch, or because we're seeing a mismatch, does this mean we're not teaching properly? So I'd like to get some final ideas about how you think technology is changing education. How do you think technology is transforming the way we work? Well, if you like, I'll start with this. Technology is transforming education, but we have a long way to go yet. We've included tools because technology without humans is impossible. We have a long way to go. We're including virtual classes, but the way that we learn or solve problems, well, we have a long way to go there. And then we have more problems now than before the pandemic with digitalization. I was talking with the person in charge of Everest. We're all connected. 95% of workers in companies are working from home. So this is a major challenge, and it changes absolutely everything. Screening people. There are cultural issues, in-person classes. It's educational to be with your classmates. Well, at work, it's really the same. We can't lose that cultural dimension of our workmates. So we have a long way to go, and we shouldn't overlook the fact that digitalization is not the same as digital transformation. There are certain sectors where there's been more transformation. And human beings at the center of everything, and human beings as actors and protagonists of everything that happens. Well, I think that technologies and the digital world is opening up huge horizons that the sphere of teaching isn't availing itself of. Education is a solid apparatus, so to speak. It's hard to transform. I always say to my friends in technology, we thought that there were even more important technological revolutions like television and radio that we thought would turn things upside down. Schools increasingly are like museums. So I think that we have huge opportunities And education is missing a lot of boats in that sense. I think that we need to look at what's being produced. Teachers are the ones who need to think about strategies and implement educational strategies. Unlike other sectors in social life, I can't imagine education without the role for teachers. I think teachers will still have a very significant role. We have teachers and schools that we still have to bolster and enhance. Education has always given way to innovation, and teachers, the teaching faculty is always key. Well, Pablo, just to finish very quickly, there's something else that's very basic that we commented on before. Companies, I saw this with my own team. We need good people, but we not only need skilled people, we need people who have goodness, who are good that way. We have a lot of challenges. We need not only people who know a lot, but people who can give of themselves a lot, day in and day out. Nobody will ever say that they're not a good person. No, you can't go to any business school to do a master's degree in being a good person. We need basic values, empathy, knowing how to listen, respect. Is almost a vintage item. It's sort of he who shouts the loudest is the best, and it's not a question of speaking loud and fast. So we have lots of cultural aspects. In Latin America, there are huge opportunities. And I think that what's really important is for us to go to what's basic, how we work day in and day out personally, on a personal basis, and learn to be better people. I think that that's what's best in life, is to do one's best. And this is something you need to work at day in and day out. It's important in any type of solution that we may have. We need to start with ourselves, and that will change the world.
Thank you very much. Perhaps to recap some ideas, let's go with this. Technology transforms eventually the world market, businesses, schools. And then skills and capacities, some will be very relevant. For example, culture cannot be replaced by technology. It is true that machines know how to do many things very quickly and better than us, but what we're good at is to combine things that you would never imagine, because we are creative. Thank you very much for participating. Thanks to all of you who accompanied us. I hope this session gave you plenty of food for thought. Thank you very much, and until next time. Thank you, and congratulations. I would like to ask you to please leave the stage on the left side. I need to close this morning's session, unfortunately, but I was very reluctant to come on stage before and close the meeting before. I agree with one of the phrases that Pablo said. It doesn't cost you any money to be a good person. We don't only need to be good people. We need to love what we do, and fortunately I think there's more of us every day. I also agree with what he said, that when we change ourselves, we change the world. So let's be more mindful, and let's really think of what we want to become and what don't want our environment to become. This was really fascinating, and having said that, we can now close this morning session of Madrid Platform. As you know, now we're going to have a 2-hour-long break because in Madrid it is lunchtime. We will see you at 4 p.m. Spanish time, so in 2 hours from now. We will kick off with the International Forum for Global Citizenship. Thank you, and see you later.